Good morning, everyone, and welcome to June the 8th. Do you believe it? 2022, Conquer the Clutter podcast. It is great to see everybody. Please forgive me if I look away from the camera, which makes you think I'm looking at you. And I enjoy looking at your faces down a little further on my screen. I know it can be a tiny bit distracting. So today we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to present the material that I've prepared for you. And then if we can, and we may run over a little bit, we're going to open the forum for maybe 5 minutes for people to jump in and make comments or offer feedback based on what you're hearing. So in each of the sessions, what I'd like to discuss, I'd like to add a piece involving discussion, if you're comfortable, all right? And then create that dialogue in real time, as opposed to just being restricted to the chat box. Now, the chat box is great, so we can use that as well. All right, so I want to get you to focus on your intent, all right? And the energy you have engaging with the desire that each and every one of you has that brings you here every week, and see if it's possible in real time to help you gradually, piece by piece, tweak what's in the way of you getting started and keeping going, all right? And then we adjust that as we discover what is in the way to help you tweak staying on the path. So it's two parts, right? It isn't just getting started. It's also keeping going and not being distracted to other paths that aren't compatible because of a number of things I'm going to remind you of that I asked you to do for homework last week. And that is, we're going to talk about what was your list of what is me and what was your list of what is not me. All right. So more about that in a bit. All right. The importance of doing this in this order is to help you make the changes and then maintain the progress. Many people tell me that they've made progress, but then for whatever reason that they don't fully understand, they find themselves having to repeat it again, and that it's not really, in their opinion, a matter of just the natural ebb and flow of maintaining. It feels like they got overwhelmed again, and now they're having to, like, will this never end, is kind of the way it seems to them. All right, that's not the same thing as making progress and being able to maintain it. Now, we're not talking realistically about maintenance being it stays at that optimal ideal level. That is totally unrealistic for everybody. All right, it's a question of degree. Okay, so here goes. We're going to start to apply the material. So if it sounds like I'm repeating myself in part from the previous 3 to 4 podcasts, you're right, I am. But I'm pulling out key pieces that now I want to attach in a link, because I want you, you know the background. You can go back and listen to those podcasts for the broader explanation. Now I want you to attach them like links and realize these are the most important factors in that getting derailed or getting off track and feeling overwhelmed and defeated. All right. So we're going to zero in on those. So if I was to rephrase that in a different way, the fact that it keeps happening could be possibly because in some way You're either not identifying that sequence that you're not maintaining, all right, that pattern that you personally need to maintain, or you're actually, for some reason, sabotaging consciously or unconsciously, all right? And that sabotage is of your efforts. If you're showing up here most weeks, then you want to make the effort. You're already making the effort, all right? So what's getting in the way of you implementing the goals that you really firmly and genuinely want? All right, so now I want each of you, all right, to look at your unique specific results to the following topics. When we look at your personal specific beliefs, beliefs are what drive us. They are the footprint that we keep quietly in the back of our mind. Sometimes we're not even aware exactly how we verbalize them, but they are fundamental pieces. Another fundamental piece, because life has a way of happening, and it doesn't always happen in a positive way, all right? Sometimes things happen, or we witness things happening to others that generate in us fears is the big word, concerns, uncertainties, trepidation, an abundance of caution, whatever the degree is for you, pick one of those, because that's the flavor, folks. It is not Rocky Road ice cream that most people say, yeah, that's one of my favorites. And then based on the beliefs and the fears, which is sort of the positive, the yin and the yang, all right, we also then, every single one of us, develop habituated behavioral patterns. Every one of us. And whatever you do the most, people, that's what you habituate. So you want to be really aware of what you're doing. And if what you're doing, if those habituated behavioral habits are leading you someplace you don't want to be, let's start with that. All right, because that's the easy answer. All right, so what did you find? I'm really curious. I'm curious about two things, actually. I'm curious about who actually does their homework, and I'm curious about what you found. So what did you find that was true for you? That you might actually be stumbling over. Does anybody have an idea about? You can unmute yourself, and just let's take 2 minutes now for people just to call out the things they think are a tripping hazard for them in maintaining their goal. Anybody? Yeah, San, go ahead.
I think the biggest thing for me, and it seems to be where I am in my stage of my life, the reason can change, but for me right now, it's that tremendous sense of ownership, responsibility for things that were not my own, but that someone else cherished. And I feel, well, this can't go to a stranger. This has to go to someone who values it as equal. And I get caught up in the emotion rather than the impact of what is it really doing for me or to me?
All right.
The emotional component.
So you've become a curator.
Yes, that's the perfect word. Yes.
All right, you've become a curator. So I'm going to give you, thank you for stepping forward. I'm going to give you a little idea. All right. And that is, sometimes some people really benefit from developing a ritual. It is not in the OCD sense, all right? But it is rituals can be important to people. Hence, the whole funeral industry. And because rituals can give you peace. What would I want you to write this down, Ted. What would the essential components be in a ritual that would allow you to identify which are the 1, 2, 3s for you, and which are the 7, 8, 9, 10s that you're hanging on to for this obligatory responsibility, and limit to the 4, 5, 6s, understanding that most of the 4s generally are houseable if you feel strongly about them and they're close enough to a 1, 2, 3. What would the essential pieces be in a ritual that would allow you to acknowledge them, maybe maintain some kind of evidence of pictures sometimes, a piece of, that would then allow you to move it forward to a functional ending that's feasible for you, so that someone who does actually feel the same way about it, all right, as the person you are honoring by holding on to, that person or stage of life you're missing, somebody else feels exactly the same about it as they did, and you don't. So the best honor, I believe, that we can do, and I've had to do this with plenty of things that I've inherited, and I miss the people. I miss them terribly. But you know what? This thing is not them. This thing is not them. And I want somebody to have that. And I've learned to trust, because I've seen it time after time after time, that if I make it available, the right new owner will find it. All right. And that is honoring it, because it will be cared for. It won't be stuck in a drawer, or stuck in the basement, or stuck in that extra room we have, or in a pile, or and it won't be a weight on your shoulders. They never intended it to be a weight that ties you down, ever, ever, ever. All right. So, but it can be a timeline that you need to follow, and to maneuver that timeline, sometimes a ritual in saying goodbye. One thing I do suggest to people who are process people, as opposed to do it once and get it over with, is to take that thing and put it where it's visible. Hopefully it doesn't occupy the whole doorway, and give yourself about a week, 10 days, 2 weeks at the most, and walk by it. As you walk by it every day, talk to it. You're not really talking to the thing. You're talking to yourself, and you're talking, if you happen to believe that, to whoever on the other side is trying to get you to honor yourself. They gave it to you. They left it to you because they wanted to honor you. That's the gift, not the thing. That you were loved and remembered, and that you were equal to, in their mind and their heart. This important thing to them was not an obligation for you to keep it. Maybe it was an obligation for you to take responsibility to get it on to the next person that you may not know, who is going to honor it, love it, and just be delighted with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Elaine. That's a really powerful distinction, that they wanted to honor me with a gift, and it's the action that was the gift, not the physical item. That's a good tool.
And
Thank
that
you.
endures. Okay, that opinion they had of you, that feeling they had about you, that love and respect they had for you, that endures. Love never dies. Love never dies. All right. Respect for an individual that is genuine and solidly based, that never dies. The thing is just a thing. All right. And maybe they were entrusting you to be the person who would take it seriously enough that you would make sure it got into the hands of somebody who 100 years from now will be handing it on to somebody else. I've learned that through many of the things. When my father died, my mother died, my sister died, my grandparents died, aunts and uncles died. All right. They trusted me with that thing under no obligation to keep it and make it a burden for me. And you know, another kind of add a little bit of a, it's true though. I think it's funny. I hope it's funny. But it's true. And that is, if they left me money, I didn't hold on to that. Okay, so I don't know why a thing would be any different from money, because they had to work for it too. Okay, so are you actually sabotaging yourself? How many of you, when you thought of the beliefs and the fears and the habituated behavioral patterns, how many of you found evidence that in some way you were holding yourself back? You had a tripping hazard that you hadn't really identified, and that was representing you, when you hold on to that, sabotaging yourself. Anybody? I see some hands up. I do. I see some hands up. Okay. All right. So possibly is one of those fears a fear of success? If it is, go back to the podcast where we really, what would be the cost of success? Has anybody here ever felt, you know, if I do that, they're going to expect more of me? I know that when I wrote the book. All right. And we got published by Johns Hopkins. Holy moly. I don't know if I ever told you the story, but when I realized who had not only accepted our book, but had gone after us, Johns Hopkins, I don't know who Johns Hopkins was. And then I started to, everybody who was very, very preeminent had either gone to Johns Hopkins, had been in some way associated with Johns Hopkins. And I called Sue and I said, oh, Sue, we're going to have to step up our game. We're playing with the big boys. Okay, what beliefs do you have about success? I felt, oh gosh, publish this book. And then when my editor called and said, have you ever thought of writing a therapist guide? I thought, oh, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. It's another expectation. Anybody afraid of that? Anybody ever experienced that? Wouldn't matter if you're painting, wouldn't matter if you clean your house and you invite somebody over, and as they leave, somebody takes a cheap shot and says, well, I certainly hope you can maintain it. This is lovely, you know? Yeah, it's sort of like, well, that was a setup. Thanks very much. That's part of a fear of success, that you'll do it, but you won't be able to maintain it. Or maybe you will disappoint yourself. You will undermine your own confidence. All right, have a look at it. Fear of failure, that one's obvious. I'm going to try and I'm not going to be able to do it. People, anything more, when you have a goal, anything more than you have accomplished right now, the smallest bit is success. Success is like a charm bracelet, all right, with the links. Links keep getting added as you're up to it. All right. It doesn't run away like a horse, where if I do it really well this time, next, I don't think I can maintain it. So I'm afraid to do it in case I open myself up for self-criticism, the voices on the committee, or somebody else. All right. All right. So are you like many people, mentally still resisting because quietly, subtly, you're responding to a fear of being controlled? That's a subtle one. If you had the type of family or the type of parents or significant others who continually undercut you by criticism or extremely high expectations, consistently, there wasn't an ebb and a flow. All right. If you had that factor in your life, and the only way as a youngster, you could get acceptance, approval, acknowledgement. If the only affirmation you got was criticism, telling you what was wrong about what you did, Is it any surprise to you, all right, that there's that part of you inside that kind of voices over that, waiting for it? It's sort of like a slap, you know? It's sort of like a slap. Are you slapping yourself? Chances are those people hopefully aren't a significant part of your life if they're still around. And when I say significant, I mean that even though you may spend time with them, you may have to be part of your familial group, you give them less meaning. You know, you say things to yourself like when you don't want to get into a conflict and be shutting down every time somebody takes a shot at you, right? Because that means they're still in control. If you're reacting, they're in control. It's when they just go on and on and on and on and on with whatever it is. And you internally say to yourself, check the source. Check the source. What else would be expected? Check the source. This is about you. This is about you. In your mind, you're saying this to them. This is, not out loud. This is about you. This is not about me. And sometimes when you've had enough, well, no, all the time, hopefully, when you've had enough. And if you have any problem with that, please go back to the Boundaries and Limits podcast. All right. You say something to them like, all right, I think we've discussed that enough. We've discussed that enough. That's enough. Or a physical link. Enough said. All right. Okay. So are you somebody who believes that you can only excel? That if you excel, you have to excel most of the time on most of the things? Otherwise, you're less than. But when have you realized, though, that if you're overwhelmed right now, could that be one of the reasons? Because when any of us apply that degree of excellence, that standard of excellence to everything we do, everything we try, it's not realistic. You can't be excellent at that standard with that many things. It's just pick and choose. What are you going to be good at? And then give it your best effort. And one of the things I ask you to do that you're going to be good at is taking care of yourself. All right? Take care of yourself. Save your energy for the things that move your life forward, your goals forward, that when you look at about yourself, you say, I'm glad I did that. It was worth the effort. Now, that may mean you don't have effort for something else. That's fine. Tomorrow's another day. All right? Don't use your energy. Don't use your effort to beat yourself up and criticize and find yourself deficient because it's not up to that standard. Let it go. Chances are the people who inundated you with that message or the environments that did, they weren't that great either. All right? They weren't that great either. Okay. So if we have any aversion to being considered average or ordinary, and we consider average or ordinary about some things in our performance, average or ordinary, and then we revert to a derogatory word like mediocre. Mediocre is like a hugely loaded word, all right? Mediocre does not mean average or ordinary, okay? Mediocre is a way to verbally punish someone, to verbally attack someone, all right? So don't use it about yourself. You can see, though, that if you make that linear association or in any way out of the areas you choose to be excellent at, no matter what they are. Choose some and excel based on your talents, based on your skills, based on your desire to increase your skill set. All right. Increasing your skill set is a great ambition. All right. But when you take that and you make it a universal standard, and you know it's a universal standard, people, because if you aren't with good effort able to get to that standard and stay at that standard, chances are you need some ebb and flow in that. And when you demand that of yourself, you are sucking the energy right out of whatever progress you can make. It is impossible to live at that standard without it costing you hugely. All right. And what it will cost you is either the fear or the lack of self-esteem to be able to maintain the willingness, just the willingness to make enough effort. All right. To achieve the things that are really important to you, that bring you to this podcast every week. And do you know what that maintaining of willingness, another word for it? What's another word for that? Could it be motivation? How many people here have told me, I just want something to increase my motivation. I'm not motivated. Well, could it be, all right? Could it be that you're sabotaging in some way fear of success, fear of failure, fear of being controlled, or some of the other fears? Motivation equals fuel. Next question. Where are you getting your fuel from? Where are you getting your fuel from? Where are you getting your motivation from? Don't lament the lack of motivation if you aren't giving yourself a source, a steady source of fuel. What is your fuel? Write that down right now. And if you don't have an obvious source of steady fuel, then the question I want you to write down is, where is my fuel? Because you have it. If you're alive and breathing, you have a source of fuel. What are you spending it on? And is it paying back? And I respectfully suggest you're not getting the return on it that you deserve. Why? Because you're with me every week. Something, you're looking for something. And it starts with motivation. It starts with fuel. All right. All right. Did you find over the last few weeks that you overwhelmed yourself or you in some way derailed yourself? Anybody? Especially when it comes to making progress, the progress that you're trying to make. Anybody? Okay. How many times when that happened, did you find yourself saying that, you know, the only reliable good way to do this is to do it alone? Hands up, how many people who do that? Wow, look at the hands. Holy smoke. Okay, tiny hint. That's part of the problem. All right. It isn't possible that you should be doing most things alone. Have you learned to delegate? Who else is going to benefit from that action, that activity, that result? Who else? How many people subscribe significantly to the belief that if it's worth doing right, you need to do it yourself? Ask yourself where that came from. because you have just tied a huge weight to your back. You know, life being a backpack? Well, that's a huge boulder. How many people here have a version on that? That if it needs to be done, well, whether it needs to be done or not, if you identify it as needing to be done, it's just easier if you do it yourself. More hands, more hands. Okay, people, that alone, this week, I'm going to give you a bit of homework, okay? 3 times this week, I want you to identify something that needs to be done, and I want you to delegate it. If you live alone and you have no one to delegate it to, because the cat is probably not going to volunteer being a cat, I want you to delegate it to another time frame, or to give yourself permission to do it in enough chunks, small chunks, that by the time you come back next week, you pick the effort, you pick the area, you pick whatever it is, you come back next week, you've done it in enough small chunks that it's done. Good enough. Good enough. All right, good enough. Pick something that is reasonable, that is bugging you. Either delegate some or all of the task to somebody else, unless it is something that truthfully is your job, making your own bed, maybe, unless you share a bed and the other person can pull up the sheets. All right. And if you don't have, like, legitimately don't have somebody to delegate to, then you delegate it in tiny chunks, enough chunks that by next week, when you come back, that task, that irritation has been dealt with good enough. And tell yourself now, before you start, all right, because if you're locked into that thinking, right out of the gate, you have to decide what is good enough. What does good enough actually look like? That way you're hitting a target. You're not going to do it the other way, where you continue to try to do it. You're not saying it to yourself, of course, but you're trying to do it ideally, perfectly, in the way that makes you 100% happy. All the little pieces go clink. Yes, okay, that's good. And then you run out of steam. Oh, that's good enough. That will feel like you gave up. I want you to decide what the target looks like ahead of time. Why? Because I'm trying to get you to learn how to habituate respecting your own limits. You respect your own limits, all right? Then you will keep your word to yourself. You will not set yourself up for failure, all right? And you won't end up playing the old game. All right? Good. All right. So let's see where we are now. All right. Are you afraid that if you don't do something in a particular way, that you won't fit in? If you don't do something, that somehow that's going to cost you your place, a way to belong in your family. And sometimes that can happen even after family is gone. All right. Or in a club or in a social milieu. All right. Because if you take a path that creates change, the change you know you need to make, somehow you lose your identity in that group, because now you are different from that group. All right. It can be cultural. It can be family. It can be social. It can be religious. And are you at risk, one way or the other, All right. It's subtle. When you get a promotion, this is a good example. All right. And suddenly you have to adopt a slightly different thinking style. But you can do it in real life too. Are you at risk of being considered somebody who thinks they're better than someone else or different from somebody else? You don't have that compatibility. And is that one of the things that holds you back from reaching the success in the areas you want? Or could it be the inverse? If I clean this place up, my family's going to expect to be invited. And they aren't high on my desire to spend my social calendar that way. Are you afraid of the consequence of not belonging anymore? Or would you even say to yourself that if you do that thing, if you make changes, if you move, Carrie, you've talked about this, if you moved out of there somewhere else, what would that mean? And would that in some way make you not as much a part of something that you hold dear? All right? Would you apply that to yourself as well? All right. So, next question. How competitive, when you went through the what is me, what is not me list, and I hope you did, how competitive did you find that you are? A lot of people say, oh no, I couldn't be bothered. All right. They're doing one thing or the other. All right. Did anybody discover that they're actually more competitive than they first thought they were? All right. That's something I have to keep an eye on. It's just a little thing in me. It's been the middle kid, right? I can beat the younger kid at it, but what about those 3 older ones? Holy smokes. Yeah. Who knew where that came from? You have to keep an eye on it. All right. Is your automatic response to compete, even if you don't want to? Even if you don't want to. You just automatically, you get that little bubble of challenge. Okay. However, that little bubble of challenge also involves, I got to win. I got to win. All right. And are you distracted by that in the course of your week, where you have that energy that you are promising to your goal and your progress? And then something happens, and before you know it, you're off on another challenge. Okay. Another way that can play out, and I've seen this many times, when you get that little bubble, all right, are you more likely to avoid situations by convincing yourself not to compete? You call it competition as opposed to contribution. If you are a competitive individual by nature, it's probably hardwired in you, all right? But doesn't mean you have to pay the full price. It doesn't mean it has to be a negative. Could you instead, when you're aware of that in yourself coming up, could you say to yourself, any contribution I can make to progress or improving this situation, that's going to be my limit. All right. If a situation isn't good enough, is there a contribution? Do I want to be known to myself as a person who made a contribution to things that weren't good enough in using my strengths and my skills, and also, people, my available time, space, and energy? All right. If you continually overdo that, then you are going to be at serious risk of no day belonging to you. Do you know the night before what your next day pretty much looks like? At least the high level things. And at the end of the day, when you look at the day that just passed, How many people here can't tick off even a contribution to each of those high level needs you had for that day? That is, if I could give you one more piece of homework, and I promise this won't keep going on. By the end of this, you'll have the whole week promised away. I want you to set yourself a tiny challenge, just a tiny one, okay? Life's going to happen every day anyway. What I'd like you to do is see if we can make it more deliberate, all right? So at the night before, I want you to sit down just on a paper, all right, and write out the date the next day at the top, and then just the high level things. It could be clean the mirrors. It could be, I don't know, take the car for an oil change. It could be anything. Just the high level things. Don't break it down into tiny details. That's too much. All right. And then the next morning, I want you to look at that paper. And I want you to say, these are 3, maybe 4, maybe 2, maybe 1 high level things that I want this day to be about. All right. Then I want you to be on guard for all of the incoming things, requests, calls, something you read in the paper, something, whatever, that distracts you and you don't actually meet your plan for that day. All right. And all you have to do, you don't necessarily have to complete every one of those things, and don't make it a long list. All right. What I'm trying to get you to do is to have a plan, formalize the plan, make yourself re-aware of the plan, and contribute in some positive way to each of those high-level things that needed to be done. You don't have to complete it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. The contribution just has to be good enough. And then at the end of the day, before you make your list for the next day, I want you to tick the ones. Now, this is not a score sheet. This is just, how deliberate am I? Am I allowing distractions? Are there factors in my life that continually contribute to? I've got a client, for instance, and she's got the heart of gold, but I don't think there's a week that goes by where somebody who didn't do their job, all right, is in an emergency and asks her to bail them out. All right. And it's an irresistible urge that she wasn't even aware of. Very few days would she be able to contribute other than the obvious things like 3 meals. All right. Is that happening with your life? Do you think maybe your energy and your motivation is going on whatever those distractions are, those interfering things? So when you're blaming yourself, when you're confused about it, I want us to turn the light up on those things that are in the back of you, in the back, all right, that are so subtle and have become so normalized that you don't even realize. That's where your day went. That's where your energy went. That's where your focus went. Maybe you've got all kinds of time left over. It's just you are absolutely running on empty. Or you're so distracted if you've got ADD or ADHD or depressed or anxious. All right? You're so used up that your head is spinning. Okay? I want you to track that this week. And I want you to come back next week. I'm going to know I have 37 people here right now. I want you to come back next week with some feedback on that one. All right. So does anybody here consider any degree of competition conflict? Anybody? Do you associate it with, for instance, anger? Competition involves anger, isolation, rejection. Any of those? And isn't it funny? Many people associate those very same reactions, experiences to conflict. Do you make yourself afraid of even trying? Because one of the things when you set a goal is you're actually setting a tiny little competition within yourself to clear that hurdle, okay? To gather speed before you come up to whatever the hurdle is and clear it. It's like running in the Olympics, you know, when they put the hurdles and they're not too high, but you got to gain speed. Well, did you give your speed away to worrying about something that you can't resolve, to a distraction, to something else? Did you give your steam away? Did you create an anxiety at the same time, even worse, more hurtful to you? Did you create an anxiety in yourself where you need a little jolt of joy to kind of soothe whatever anxiety you're generating? So not only are you not completing what you really want to and achieving that progress, you're giving yourself a reason physiologically. That's a hormonal response that you're responding to when you do that. All right. You're bringing more of that in to feed. Can you see that that's what happens? All right. Can you see that that's what happens? Stop the cycle. Stop the cycle. Okay. How many people here would call themselves high and off people? You're either on or you're on the couch. Okay. Energy wise, how many people energy wise? Okay. How many attention? You're high and off attention. They either have your laser focus or what did you say? What were the details? Okay. How about, so if you're either 110% committed or you're on stall, right? Okay. Do you realize how much you're missing by being an all or nothing person? And are you surprised when you don't get the results you want? It isn't the high and off that's going to get you there or keep you there. If whatever it is important enough that you are challenged enough to be here with me every week, I swear, people, it is the little bit you do on a regular, sustainable basis that is going to get you there and is going to keep you there. All right. All high and off is going to do is it's going to burn you out. High and off is reasonable if the house is on fire. High and off is reasonable if you're giving somebody CPR. Do you want to live or do you want to have to be resuscitated? Energy-wise, focus-wise, happiness-wise, self-respect-wise. Which of those two do you want? Because high and off, you're on a path to resuscitation. It will not be too long before you're overwhelmed again. And when you're overwhelmed, you know the result. Pull back from the urge to be high and off. I mean it literally. If you create a drudge by overdoing the efforts to make an ongoing contribution to the solution, if you overdo that and you create a drudge, you won't go back to that. You won't go back to that activity enough to finish it. Okay? Slow and steady wins the race. Okay, I'm dying to know the answer to this one. Okay, on your list, for those of you who did it, what did you enter under what is me? The positive, the negative, and the neutral. And what did you enter in the other column, the what is not me? The positive, the negative, and the neutral. Anybody? You can unmute yourself. No takers. It's a little personal, I know. Let me start us off. Okay, so what is me for me? What is me is whether I was born with it or I learned it or I developed it, but at my age, it's part of my nature. All right, what is me? I can't stand not finishing something. Now, I'm sure as a kid, I'm sure as a teenager, that was not always the case. All right, but you know what I do? What is also me is I don't take on Herculean tasks. I learned that I need to figure out how much steam I have in the tank on any day, and it differs, right? And then I identify the task to do that is equal to what I bring to that day. And quite often, I have to revamp. I will do half of that and it will get finished tomorrow. So then I give myself a strategy that, all right, I still need some energy left over in the tank. And so I'm going to do a half or a quarter, and this will be my finish date, but that will be my finish date come hell or high water. Not because I'm an A type, I'm not. I'm very much a B type, but because I've learned the value of when I give myself my word about me, I keep my word about me. All right. And what's involved in that? Self-applied boundaries and limits. Do you have boundaries and limits for yourself that you set for yourself? Charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. What boundaries and limits do you need to set for yourself? Boundaries and limits aren't just about other people. They're also about yourself. Because when you set a boundary and limit for yourself about keeping your word to yourself, when you say you'll do something, all right? You think long and hard about what you give your word to. You don't set yourself up for, it's a rare thing when you set yourself up for disappointing yourself or disappointing somebody else. And that makes you feel safe. All right? That makes you feel safer when you know that you're not always apologizing. You're not always whatever. All right? Okay. What did you put under the not me? What is not me? Anybody? Let me help you out. For me, okay, yeah, somebody,
I'm not
somebody,
consistent.
not consistent. Okay, not consistent. All right. So put that down, write that down. And when you are doing your highlights for what you're going to do each day, one of the things that I want you to do is I want you to put be consistent. And you know how you're going to be consistent? You're going to be consistent when you can go back and realize, I'm not going to overpromise. I'm going to do 1/4 of what the job involves, but I am consistently going to do that. Now, I think most people here would think of me as kind, and I am. In my not me column, I live by the rule of 3, and I hold it like I hold my driver's license, my passport, my passport to whatever, okay? And the rule of 3 for me is the first time you do something, it's an accident. Nobody's perfect. The second time it happens, it's a coincidence, right? Maybe I wasn't clear, maybe you weren't clear, maybe there was a miscommunication. And the third time it's a pattern, we deal with it. We deal with it. We deal with it honestly, without blame, but we deal with it. And that's with myself as well. All right, but my own behavior. First time was an accident. Second time, maybe we weren't clear. It was a coincidence. And the third time, it's a pattern. Do you want to be dealing with this the 10th, 12th, 15th, 100th, 300th time? I invite you to consider, how could the rule of 3 work for you? And what skills, what fears would you have to face in order to cut the crap out of your life? What skills? Assertiveness? Conflict resolution? What other skills? All right, okay. Let me see where we are now. Hold on. All right. Okay, we're going to, how many people can stay for, say, another 10 minutes? Most people can. Okay. Remember that what we tell ourselves, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, is what we use. Oh, where did I go? Here, sorry. I seem to have jumped. Hold on, Braden, you are going to have to do this. Okay. Sorry, guys. It jumped. There we are. All right. So, the meaning of things is, I don't know why the universe decided to make that jump right then. Do you find yourself lacking on any of the following? All right. And then reverting to applying a meaning to something that doesn't work well for you. And that would be focus, energy, effort, all right? What you learn from something. Do any of you find that in dealing with something, you apply a meaning based on your first reaction or based on what you're left over with when you experience a lack of focus, you're distracted, you're trying to make an important decision and you've got no energy left. You've used yourself up and physically you can't make the effort. You're sure that you don't have all the facts or enough facts about the situation, but you're going to apply a meaning anyway. How many people do that when something happens and they have to apply a meaning to it? Anybody? Mm-hmm. How many people are comfortable enough to put themselves on pause and give themselves a chance to reflect? There's just a piece missing here. I don't feel I have enough of whatever. And it isn't avoidance, it isn't diversion. All right, and it isn't that you're being a perfectionist. It's that all the pieces aren't in place here. I don't have the energy. I'm distracted by something else. I'm confused, and I don't think I have the facts. All right. When you do put yourself on pause, you give yourself the opportunity to discover if part of that discomfort involves something that's going to surprise you. All right. Can you see on your what is me list, what is not me list? Can you see how heavily, are there any patterns? Can you see how heavily each column that you've written down about the fundamental pieces of yourself are going to influence your personal choices? Can you see that that is the foundation piece, who you believe you are and who you believe you aren't? Are there any connections between the ways you're disappointed in where you are right now and anything that is in one of those two columns, who you are and who you aren't? Do they correlate at all? Did you make the list? Did you make the list? If you didn't make the list, make it, because almost for sure, there's something in one of those two columns that correlates with the lack of success, the lack of satisfaction you have about one of the key areas that are bothering you. All right. So since we've been discussing this, this whole procrastination, breaking it down into fears, breaking it down into chunks, how many people here feel that they have actually moved forward in the stage of change from where you started? Okay. Remember, pre-contemplation, not even thinking about it. Contemplation, yeah, I'm starting to consider, I'm starting to think about things. Preparation, where are you? Preparation, yeah. Not only have I started to pull things together that I believe I will need, I'm pretty sure that I'm closing in on the tools, maybe some of the attitudes, the skills. I've got more to think about that are more likely to be associated with what I want to accomplish. Action, yep, I have actively started to work at whatever that goal is. How many people have made progress in the stage you're at? Okay. So from where you started to where you are now, big question. What influenced your progress? Can you put it in the chat box now? If you have moved forward even from pre-contemplation to contemplation, that's progress. If you've moved from contemplation to preparation, that's progress. if you've moved from preparation to action. You don't have to have gone from pre-contemplation to action. All right, you don't have to have done that. Have you moved forward? What, big question, what influenced your progress? I want to see those numbers go up. We're at 16 right now. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Keep going, people. Why am I asking this? I'm asking this because future successes are built on past successes. Whatever has influenced you, all right, is part of your future success. It's a piece. It's a piece of it. Something about that is giving you something that you can use, even for those people who said, working with me here, attending the podcast, that's kind. But I'm not that powerful. All right. I'm not that important. Yes, I'm happy to do this. I really believe that people shouldn't be left unresourced if there's any way possible, even if it's just me spending an hour and 10 minutes with people to give them information to work from. It's what you're doing after that that I want you to give credence to. You sought a solution. You were brave enough to say, you know what, I'm going to suspend my fear. I'm going to suspend disbelief. I'm going to suspend how discouraged and overwhelmed I am. I'm going to do this one thing. That willingness is what's responsible for you changing stages. All right. Did you learn a skill? Are you more informed? But you took responsibility for finding where the source of information was that you wanted to trust and work with. That's your accomplishment, not mine. Have you developed more experience about how Glenda, how Denise, how Laura, how Kelly, how each of you would use that information personally to work with your strengths, to work with your vulnerabilities, your limitations? Okay? That's your accomplishment. What is your strong suit? What are your strengths? Remind yourself of that. As you're learning from other people, the temptation to think is that they're the answer. I'm not the answer. I have a lot of experience to offer, but it's like a buffet. You need to go up and down and pick the things that work for Kelly, that work for Suzanne, that work for Mary Ellen, that work for Mervette. You need to pick from the buffet. You need to try it and see, does that work? I think we need a little more of this. We need a little more of this. Oh, it didn't work so well. How'd that go wrong? Okay, we're going to try this. You need to not lose that courage, and you need to not lose that self-respect that you are worthy of the answers you're looking for. And you're up to the answers, not in one step, not by jumping off the high board. All right, step by step. However, in that stage of change, what is your area that you realize is first and foremost, most in need of development? What is that for you? Write it down. Write down what you're guessing. And at the same time, on the other column, because this is what I want you to be about yourself, the love and acceptance of the strengths and the vulnerabilities. What are your strengths? One of them, okay, if you give people enough hope and enough good information and you teach them a few skills, then they develop perseverance. All of those. knowing your vulnerabilities, watching out for them, not allowing them to become overtaxed or triggered, and knowing your strengths, having respect for the fact that you do have a positive side and you're not giving up. That will always work to success. So whatever worked the last time to move you forward, that is the same thing I want you to build on this week. And I want you to ask yourself an important question. How can I get more of that? How can I use that better? And for some of you, that may be going back into the library on the website, of listening to some of the, just a reminder, okay, now I'm really ready to understand what she was talking about, that I only got that much out of. All right, but now I'm ready to understand more. Use it that way. Use it that way. All right. What do you still need, however, to strengthen your strengths? All right. What do you need to do, to learn, to compensate in the areas you still need to work? And is there anything at this point that is consistently holding you back? And I'm going to end on this. And how, I want you to send it in the chat box, or I want you to be ready next week to put it in the chat box. How can I help you to let go or work around whatever it is that's holding you back? How can I be part of that? Am I the answer? No, I'm not. But I bet dollars to donuts, after the experience I've gained in 20 years of working with people just like you, all right, I bet that they've taught me some things that might be worth offering to contribute to the options you have. Good? You got a bit of homework. Have a great week, and I will see you next week. Okay, take care. Bye, everybody.